BillyCBoxing.com network.
Coming to you live from the Billy C Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Caligione. It's time for the Billy C Show. Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're watching, whenever you're listening. I hope you're doing okay. Today's show is being brought to us in part by Sal's Neighborhood Pizzeria and Italian Restaurant located on St. Simon's Island in Georgia. Check out his website, salsneighborhoodpizzeria.com, or give my man a call, 912-268-2328, 912-268-2328. Find out why I go all the way to St. Simon's for an authentic Italian meal. And make sure you tune in next time for a special announcement about Sal's. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by the Title Bout Championship computer game. Download your copy today. Visit our website, BillyCBoxing.com, and click on the Title Bout banner. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by our 24-hour, 7-day-a-week boxing channel. That's right, you can watch it on all the major streaming devices like Roku. Just visit JinnicoUSA.com and sign up today. It's for free. Catch all of our shows. You can also watch them on your smart TVs through YouTube. Check it out, man. I mean, I didn't even realize that, and I was watching some old shows last week. Also, today's show is being brought to us in part by Kenny Bear's Barbecue Rub and their new line of stuff. Order yourself a bottle now, SouthernGourmetSpice.com, SouthernGourmetSpice.com. And finally, today's show is being brought to us in part by my book. Tom Molyneux, From Bondage to Baddest Men on the Planet, is available right now where all good books are sold. Get a copy of this book right now. You can get one by visiting BarnesandNoble.com or Amazon.com. If you want a signed copy or want something special, just drop me an email, Billy@TalkinBoxing, TalkinBoxing.com. By the way, you can order the book too right from our website, BillyCBoxing.com. We got the crew coming on a little bit later. I wanted to talk about the two fights, Jaime Munguia and Spike O'Sullivan in their fight, and then, of course, Joe Smith Jr. against Jesse Hart. First and foremost, I'll give you my quick thoughts on the Munguia fight. Jaime Munguia looked good. You know, a couple weeks ago they were saying, oh, he's got speed. All of a sudden he's got speed. And I was critical on this very show, saying that, what do you mean, he gained speed? He did. I tell you what, the addition of Eric Morales, I think, is proven to be a smart move for Jaime. I thought that he did look faster. I think he's definitely more comfortable at this weight. And, I mean, his movement was there. That jab was gorgeous. I think that he still needs to work on his defense. He did move around a little bit more head movement-wise, but he still took way too many shots. In case you missed it, he stopped Gary Spike O'Sullivan at 2 minutes and 17 seconds of the 11th round. Munguia improves to 35-0 with 28 knockouts. Gary Spike O'Sullivan drops to 30 wins, 4 losses, with 21 of his wins coming by knockout. At the end of the fight, Munguia said, this was a new division for me. I felt stronger and with more conditioning. I just needed to adjust my speed to fully be comfortable. I would give my performance a 7 or an 8 because I needed to do a few more things, but we will get there fight by fight. I was confused about whether to attack or not to attack. Sometimes I thought I had to attack, but I didn't. But thanks to my corner and Eric Morales, I was able to get him. On the last rounds, I was more attentive, even though I still got punched a few times. He also said that he wants to fight the best of the division, a la Canelo Alvarez, Triple G, or the Charlos. He says he knows they have more experience, but he looks forward to those fights. I see him at some point, if he continues moving upward, to get a showdown with Canelo down the road. I don't think soon, but the fight I would love to see, Charlo. Let him fight Charlo. I would love that fight. That fight would prove a lot for Charlo, but I just don't think Charlo has the you-know-whats to step in the ring with Jaime Munguia. As far as looking at those two fighters, I had predicted, although I didn't say it on the show, I had predicted Munguia to win the fight. When you look at his resume, he's still only 23 years old. He won 5 of his last fights, 6 fights going into this one against good opposition. Some wins against Dennis Hogan, Takeshi Inoue, Brandon Cook, Liam Smith, and Saddam Ali. Gary O'Sullivan, tough guy. Give him credit. 30 wins and now 4 losses. But previously, the other 3 losses, Billy Joe Saunders, he went the distance with, and he was stopped by Lemieux and Chris Eubank Jr. O'Sullivan's a tough guy. Munguia got penalized for hitting below the belt in that fight. O'Sullivan was doing a lot of complaining, but O'Sullivan did land a couple of shots. Munguia's got to tighten up his defense. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Clearly has to tighten up his defense if he wants to compete with the names that he's throwing around. Although I think he destroys Charlo right now. Right now, as you know, I don't think much of Charlo. But in any event, in the other big fight last night in the light heavyweight division, Joe Smith Jr. improved to 25-3 with 20 knockouts. As he dominated Jesse Hart. Hart drops his 3rd fight of his career. He's now 26-3. It was in Atlantic City. It was a 10-round fight. Joe Smith Jr. Basically attacked Jesse Hart. Jesse Hart early in his career was in there with some tough guys, but not so much in the last couple of years. His 2 losses going into this fight were both against Gilberto Ramirez. Joe Smith, on the other hand, had a couple of big wins going back to 2015. Will Rowinski, Fabian Soares, Andres Fonfaro when he was hot, and he retired Bernard Hopkins with a stoppage in the 8th round. His last 3 fights, he's 1-2. He lost to Bivol and Sullivan Barrera, but he didn't lose to Jesse Hart last night. Jesse Hart really aggravated me. I thought that it would be a very back and forth fight. I was leaning towards Joe Smith Jr., but I thought it would be a back and forth fight. It wasn't. Hart was holding on. I mean, this was a joke. The way he was holding on. He should have been deducted a point. I was a little, disgusted with Harvey Dock for not, deducting a point from him. It was excessive. It was excessive. I can understand getting in trouble and holding on. I think any referee would allow that. But this guy was clearly running hard. I'm talking about clearly running, and anytime he was caught up to by Joe Smith Jr., he literally put him in a bear hug, and he wasn't warned once about it. It bothered me. It bothered me that he did that. At some point, I don't want to sound, like I want to see a knockout drag out. A knockdown, drag out, brutal affair every time. But you know what? You need to see it in fights occasionally. And what you don't need to see is a runner from the get-go. And that's what Jesse Hart was. I mean, this was a big fight for him. He worked with B-Hop. It was a lot of pride. This was a big fight for both of them, as it appears that the winner, in this case Joe Smith Jr., would be getting a shot at the WBO title that was vacated by Canelo Alvarez, who won it from Sergey Kovalev. But at the end of the night, Joe Smith Jr., who dominated this fight, wins a split decision. I mean, this is what's wrong with boxing. Joe Smith Jr. dominated this fight. There was one knockdown, official knockdown, but there was another one where Hart, I thought it should have been called a knockdown. I mean, he was, in Dream Street, and the ropes were keeping him up, in my opinion. At the end of the night, two judges had it one-sided. One judge saw it 97-92. The other had it 98-91, which is pretty much how I scored it. And then the third judge, if this guy wasn't paid off, well, either that or he should never be allowed to judge a fight again because he doesn't know what the hell he's looking at. He scores the fight 95-94 for Jesse Hart. I don't understand it. I don't understand how you can come up with that score. I don't care where you were, as far as which side of the ring you were on, the three spots that the judges sit at. I don't care where you were. There was no way that Jesse Hart was even close. Even if you scored the fight close, how do you lean towards Jesse Hart? Even if you scored the fight the same way for Joe Smith Jr., I would still be critical, but at least you got the right side right. This guy goes and scores it for Hart. I was shocked. I was shocked in that. Smith handled it pretty well at the end. I got an email from my man Mitch. He says, from Jesse Hart, the title of his email says, "I don't want to make excuses, but," and Jesse Hart said after the fight, "I hurt my hand a week ago. You could see it's messed up. I don't want to make any excuses because Joe fought a great fight, but I hurt my hand in my last sparring session and thought I could overcome it. Credit to Joe for doing what he had to do." That's not giving credit to Joe Smith Jr. I'm sorry. That's Jesse Hart punking out, making an excuse. There's no way you can get around it. He made an excuse, okay? And it drives me insane. Something that it flew under the radar for me for years was the fact that Tommy Hearns broke his hand against Marvin Hagler in probably the best 3 rounds of live boxing that I ever witnessed live, watching it unfold in front of me. But I never knew it. I never knew that he broke his hand because he never said a word about it. And, he felt that Hagler deserved the credit that night, regardless of what the outcome was, and let him get the credit. And handled it like a man. All these fighters today that start off with the "I don't want to make excuses, but," means an excuse is coming. I mean, no matter how you slice it, an excuse is coming. And it's very disheartening to me, to see and listen to a fighter do that. It's sad. It's sad because in this particular fight, he got battered around. He was holding. The truth of the matter is he lost the fight, and he should have just, took it the way a man would take it, the way a fighter should take it. I don't want to make excuses, but I hurt my hand in sparring. Hey, if you get injured in boxing, and it's going to prevent you from being 100% in your fight, there's an easy solution. You know what it is? Don't fight. You might upset a promoter, you might upset some of the fans, but if you're in a position where you're going to be endangered, and if you clearly had an unusable hand, which I got news for you, never looked that way to me during the fight, but if that's the case, don't fight. I don't want to make an excuse, but I broke my hand in sparring. Give me a break. He was battered, and he was scared. He was holding on. All the credit in the world goes to Joe Smith Jr. Joining me right now, my main man from the warm South, Rocky Senecola. What's up, Sal?
Hey, good morning, Bill. How are you, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing well, thank you. I'm doing well. First and foremost, we're talking about the 2 big fights last night. Munguia stops Spike O'Sullivan. I thought he looked fantastic, to tell you the truth. I was critical. I started the show saying, for the last 2 weeks, I was critical of some of the comments that were released from his camp saying, "Oh, he's faster," and I said, "Oh yeah, how does he How does he become quicker? He looked faster. He looked good. What was your thoughts?
I thought he looked great. I thought, I'll tell you, he was pretty sharp, and I'll tell you, it was just a matter of, I guess, it was a good fight. He did better than I thought. He was pretty quick, and I liked how he landed that hook off the jab a lot, and things like that. He ran a couple good shots.
Yeah, well, how about his jab? His jab looked really well, and Eric Morales in his corner, I think it showed in the fight.
Oh, yeah. His jab was sharp, very sharp, and I was pretty happy with that, too. He definitely, he was doing a great job last night.
You know, the other thing I thought, Sal, and I made a comment about it, I think he's only 23 years old, and I think he's, becoming a very good fighter. One thing I really, and I've been saying this for a while, and if he doesn't fix it, his career is going to be short-lived, but he needs to tighten up his defense. He takes too many shots.
Yeah.
And I think I think he's trying, because he did move his head a little bit. I don't recall him moving his head much at all prior to last night. How does a fighter because you were an aggressive fighter, wanting to take your opponent's head off, how do you learn to think about not getting hit? Because obviously if you're an aggressor and you're used to knocking people out, you have a tendency to forget the fundamentals of moving your head or fighting defensively. How do you teach a guy that?
Well, and that's just something. It's more or less innate in a sense, but you could slip a punch, you could feint with your head, and that's what I saw last night. For the first time, I saw him feint a little bit, and you draw them in by feinting, and you counter at that time. So. I saw that, and that was more evident than I have ever seen. So it was really neat to watch him do it.
I do give O'Sullivan credit. He's a tough character. I did think he was crying a little bit, complaining about everything, but he is a tough guy. I give him credit. He could have stopped the action a lot sooner than going as far as he did.
Yeah, I couldn't believe he let it go that far, because Spike O'Sullivan, he only had his moments, but he was clearly losing the fight, and I think that he had it. Like I said, he had his moments, but clearly he was on the short end of the stick when it came to the majority of the rounds going his way.
Joe Smith Jr., I thought, gave Jesse Hart a lesson, maybe not so much in the finesse aspect, but he certainly attacked him all night long, and he gets a split decision. What was your thoughts on the one judge? I mean, 98-91 and 97-92, totally legit scores for Smith Jr., and then the one judge scored at 95-94 for Jesse Hart. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, I was very surprised at that, and I'll tell you. Hey, Bill, can you hear me well? Because I just got a comment.
I hear you fine. Hear you fine.
Okay, great. Okay, so anyway, Joe Smith, Jesse Hart had his moments. I was impressed. I liked the hook off the jab that Jesse caught him with. Sometimes he caught him with a good right hand. He just didn't have enough power behind the punches to really deter Joe Smith. Joe Smith was a 100% aggressor coming forward, dishing it out, and he left himself open quite a bit, though, and he's got to, like we said, you've got to be careful in the future.
Well, in the Smith fight, Hart was holding on so much. I was throwing things at my TV because I couldn't believe that he wasn't warned at all. And he had a really good referee, one of the best in the business, in Harvey Dock in there. And I was surprised that Hart didn't get at least warned. I mean, he was running, just literally running away from Joe Smith Jr. And when Smith would finally get him against the ropes or in a corner, he latched onto him with a bear hug. I mean, it was annoying as a fan watching the fight. I mean, what was it doing to you?
Well, I think you're right, because he just held on for life. He wanted to survive. But like we saw, I no way could have given that fight to Jesse Hart. And
I don't know what that one.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know what that one judge was looking at, but it was pretty sad. Anyway, back to the Munguia fight with O'Sullivan. I know we're jumping around here, but he says he wants to fight the best in the division. He threw out Canelo's name, Triple G, or the Charlo brothers. I would love to see him fight those top guys. I don't think he's really ready yet, but one fight I really would like to see is for him to fight Charlo. I think Charlo is totally overrated, and I think Munguia would destroy him.
Oh, Munguia, let me tell you, he's a tough son of a gun. He's a tough out. You got to be careful. He impressed me 100%. He really did a great job.
Yeah. So we're talking about Munguia again. What do you did you see any? I know you were a big Eric Morales fan. Did you see any Eric Morales in his fight? I didn't, but I thought that the intelligence of Morales has helped him.
Oh yeah, definitely, it has helped a lot. But I thought that he just outclassed him. But he was good. I enjoyed the fight very much.
One other thing I'll get your thoughts on. We also we know about the fight between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. That's coming up. Will be on pay-per-view in February. But it looks like Anthony Joshua and Kubrat Pulev will be the next fight for AJ. There was some threats from the WBO about Usyk, but I have a feeling that Usyk may be going a different route prior to, and let Anthony Joshua fight Pulev for that mandatory for the IBF, and then come back and fight Usyk next. What's your thoughts against Pulev? He's a type of fighter that is very strong and does have power, but a good boxer generally has his way with him. It was actually his fight against Klitschko that I saw the version of Klitschko I wish we saw for his whole career. He was absolutely attacking mode and destroyed Pulev. What's your thoughts on Pulev, AJ?
I'll tell you, I hate to say this, but I think AJ's got to really prove something coming back and see if he can withstand arsenal of attacks and his chin can take it. I'm concerned about AJ because he get very hurt after he got hurt last time. But we'll see what's left. And but I think it's going to be a decent fight. It should be.
Well, I hope so. Sal, I appreciate your thoughts, and we'll be looking forward to you next week.
Hey, man, you take good care. Hello to everybody, and I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you later.
Take
That's Sal Rocky Senecola, and like I said, make sure you tune in next week. I have an announcement I'm going to be making about Sal and his place and some stuff that we've been working on. So make sure you're here next time. But in any event, I just it bothers me to see one judge so out of whack on that whole thing, because to me it's a shame that a fighter like Joe Smith Jr. even had to worry about what that decision was going to be, because and even his corner was saying it to him. But in any event, joining me right now, we'll get his thoughts on both of those big fights, and he'll give us his report. He was live for the Clarissa Shields fight. Dax Khan's with us. Good morning, Dax.
Good morning.
All right, first and foremost, Munguia against Spike O'Sullivan takes a knockout win, 2 minutes and 17 seconds of the 11th. I got to be honest with you, Dax. You know, I saw some of your thoughts during the fight, and I think that Munguia looked good. I thought that he looked good. I actually think that he did get faster, which last week I was laughing at. I was like, how does somebody get fast? But he did. You know, I'd like to see a little more defense out of him, but I like what I saw. What's your thoughts of the fight?
I've always liked him. You know, I've always been a fan of the kid. You know that. But he just needs to improve some of these flaws. You know, what I see is somebody who got a world title when he wasn't ready to get a world title, which is a problem in the sport because world titles are in the abundance. Now, with that being said, you know, yes, he has really improved on that jab. We know that he's strong. He's not really a knockout artist. He has to get his guys with some accumulation. You know, it's, in my opinion, Bill, they need to pull the reins back on him, and they more or less kind of need to rebuild him. If Spike O'Sullivan, who's a tough guy but limited, can land some clean, hard shots on Munguia, a few times he buzzed him because Munguia loses his focus. He reverts back to what he knows best, and that's just come forward. This division is not the 154-pound division. His team really needs to get him to understand that. Top guys in this division, and again, because he's already won that world title, he's going to be expected to face nothing but the top names. He is not going to be able to go in there against an Andrade, a Eubank Jr., a Charlo, or a Sergey Derevyanchenko, using this style and reverting back to what he knows best. Because these guys are not only are they world-class boxers, but they have some serious power of their own. So I think Munguia needs to go back, and they have to have him fight some guys in the lower tier, you know, some solid journeymen, kind of rebuild him, what they should have been doing early on. I know that despite the amount of fights he has, a lot of those fights were not against the world class. You know, they were down in Mexico. So in my opinion, that's what needs to happen for Jaime Munguia if he's going to be expected to be up there and compete with that top level. Or he's going to end up more or less a poor man's Fernando Vargas.
You know, I think there's no question that his defense has to be worked on. He takes too many shots. But, I guess I disagree to a sense. I think he destroys Charlo. I really do. I think he destroys Charlo. Charlo is a fighter that looks the part, but neither one of them is that great. I haven't seen them prove it. They haven't fought anybody good enough. So I would like to see that fight. As far as him being ready for the other top dogs of the division, I'm with you 100%. A Canelo or a Triple G, and you mentioned Derevyanchenko, a guy that's still being forgotten about. Great analogy there because
Derevyanchenko, if he can take Triple G shots all night, he's going to be able to take Munguia shots.
Exactly. No. I'm with you there, and I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him, fight another guy like that. First, but if he does have to maintain title approaches or what have you, I would love to see him fight Charlo. I like the fight, and I think that he's ready for that. I don't think Charlo brings anything that would. The problem with this kid is he takes too many shots, and you're right. If he doesn't tighten up his defense, at least moving his head. But it was a little better. I did see some head movement in his fight, Dax.
Yeah, a little bit, again, because, like I'm stating, I'm not trying to bash the kid. It's just that this division is at another level. As we talk about all the time, this sport has levels. And he's just not going to be at that level in this division because of how good the other guys are. It's not an insult to Munguia. It's more or less just, this is a better division with bigger, harder punchers. What I would like to do, again, see him rebuild a little bit, have them fix some of these flaws, have them find guys where can give him a little bit of resistance, but, they can kind of keep him defensively responsible, let him not revert back to his old ways, and a good matchup for him before he fights a Charlo or a Eubank Andrade or so on is Ryota Murata, the WBA regular champion, if they insist on going for a belt, who has a very similar style. And I think that would be a great fight. And then if he gets past that, then Munguia will be ready for the other guys. Right now, I just think it's bad news for him. He's young. Remember, he's young.
23. That was the other thing, So it was a good Fernando Vargas comparison. But Joe Smith Jr. Had a tack on his mind, and he fought Jesse Hart. I picked Joe Smith to win the fight, but I thought it was going to be a lot more back and forth than it was. Jesse Hart basically ran all night and held them like they were lovers. What was your thoughts on that fight?
Well, that's two Philly fighters who said they were going to beat up and dispose of Joe Smith Jr. and didn't work out, and one was actually there to avenge the other. Sometimes you should just let your hands do your talking instead of your mouth, huh?
Right.
But that split decision, come on, man. Really?
Yeah.
How did they get a split decision? That was terrible. I mean, we know that Joe Smith Jr. has trouble with boxers. Jesse Hart, definitely the better boxer. He's taller, has a longer reach. He has everything that really in the past has troubled Joe Smith Jr., including the fact that in his last outing or his outing prior to that, he beat the guy that dominated Joe Smith Jr. in Sullivan Barrera. Bill, in my opinion, this tells us exactly how good Dimitri Bivol is, because Bivol just had Smith shelled up on the ropes a lot of times. But, the pressure inside, he was in phenomenal shape to be able to keep coming forward and let loose that many punches. I mean, maybe he took one round off, but Joe Smith Jr. was just in there all night long. There was a few times, though, I'm saying to myself, did he just watch Rocky back in the dressing room, the way he just came in head first with his hands in front of him? If Joe Smith Jr., Bill, if they can incorporate a jab into him, a steady jab into him, I think Joe Smith Jr. can actually win a belt at this division. He's always in great shape. He has tremendous power. He has a great chin. If they just round him out a little bit, I think Joe Smith Jr. can win a belt in this division, not be the king of the division, but, like I stated with Munguia, because belts are plentiful, Joe Smith Jr. should be able to win a belt. He's the type of guy that, because he works so hard, his skills are limited, but he always gives the fans what they want. He never fights an easy fight. He leaves it all in the ring. You just want this guy to have a good, huge payday before he leaves the sport. He still works full-time, for gosh sakes.
No, I know. And, first of all, I thought two things. Number one, and I think they're working on it because it was evident last night, and every time you'd hear it in the background, he would do it. They're trying to tighten up his defense. They're trying to have him keep his hands up normal, like as a normal thing to do, not to have to keep reminding him. But for the most part, he kept him up longer than I've ever seen it before. He was also showing us some stuff that I don't recall him doing as proficiently, and that is setting up his power shot. He was working the body, coming back to the head. He was getting through the guard of Jesse Hart. He was doing some things that made me think that he's thinking more versus just attacking. And I do agree with you that he needs to work on some defense, not just keeping his hands up, but maybe moving his head. And if he could incorporate a jab, I'm with you. He'd be tough out. He's like Deontay Wilder has that one-punch knockout power and really doesn't possess anything else. Well, Joe Smith looks like he could. Right now, I would say he's similar to a Deontay. He's got the one-punch knockout power, and he clearly hurt Jesse Hart a couple of times in that fight. I wouldn't have been surprised if they stopped it after he had the jelly legs, but I like what I saw.
And this was a great fight for Joe in terms of, though Jesse Hart is the better boxer, he didn't have the power to hurt Joe Smith, and it allowed him to try some of those things like you were just saying. And I agree, I did see that. And if you notice, there were a few times where you could see him coming in and he was waiting for that counter. He was kind of trying to roll with it. He rolled with it a few times. So, this is the type of fight that Jaime Munguia should be in, to improve his skill set. So it was a great fight. It was all action. Great job to Joe Smith Jr. And, hopefully he gets himself a big fight, and he just continues to keep on improving because the guy certainly deserves it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Did you get to see Xander Zayas fight? He improved to 3-0. Going the distance with Corey Champion, who was 1-1 going into the fight, dominating 4-round fight, 40-36 twice, 40-35 once. What's your thoughts of this kid? He's getting a lot of PR.
He's Bill, like the kid on the Munguia card. These are literally kids. It's, not an expression. These are literally kids. He's 17 years old. He seems to have all the skills. Hopefully he can improve. He's going to keep growing. He's not even reached his man strength, his man body yet. So I'm excited to see what this kid has to offer. I thought he looked sensational inside the ring. And, he has that great amateur pedigree. I know in the Nationals, he won 1 year, and then he was a semi or quarterfinalist. And then in the juniors, I think he won second or third place. The kid is still building. Me personally, I would keep him in the amateurs I would have kept him in the amateurs another year or two and then put him into the pros. But you have to like what you see there, especially when it sits inside your mind. This kid is 17 years old.
He's top ranks Ryan Garcia. That's what happened with Golden Boy. They got him. I got into kind of a discussion with Coach. He was emailing me back and forth, and he says, "Oh, make sure you check this guy out. He's this, he's that." And I made a comment. I said, "Yeah, he's lucky that he signed on with Top Rank because now they're going to carefully select his opposition. They're going to invest money in his public relations, his PR, and he'll become just like a Ryan Garcia, where he'll have a big fan base." And, he'll make some money and he'll be groomed for a title shot. And then we'll have to, get better and better once he gets the title, similar to what's going to happen when Ryan wins his title.
Like the kid Kalkruth on the other card. I believe they have like the same, more or less. I know they were in some of the same tournaments together.
But my point with Coach was that, in boxing, the sad reality is that there are a lot of kids in the gym, and I know you're big with the amateurs. There's a lot of kids in the gym that work their tails off and that show promise. But for whatever reason, they don't get an opportunity with a promoter that will invest money in actually promoting them, and they end up getting fed to the fighters prematurely. They get fed to more advanced fighters. And, sometimes you see these fighters with a not so impressive record, but they're good fighters. The thing happened on one of the cards. I think it was the Smith card, where they had a young showcase fighter that was supposed to be undefeated. He ends up getting a draw, and they're going, "Oh, he gets a draw with a 19-7 guy," or whatever the guy's record was, 18-7. And I'm saying, and I thought to myself, yeah, they had an 18-7 guy. I didn't even look at his record, but he probably fought some tough guys early on, and is a lot better than his record would suggest.
Oh yeah, that's again because of that mentality of if somebody loses their O, or when there's a lot of expectations and hype behind a guy, even when they're young like this, if they don't perform well in one of these matches, especially when it's a showcase match, that can hurt their marketability with the mindset of today's fans. But the reason why I mentioned Tristan Kalkruth on the Munguia card is that we're starting to see a big influx of these young fighters. David Benavidez, remember when he won his title, he was only, 22? Same thing with Tank Davis. I believe he was, 20, 21 when he won his first world title. We're starting to... these fighters just seem to be getting younger and younger. Not only are fighters getting bigger, doesn't matter what weight class it is, a 154-pounder walks around as a cruiserweight and so on, they're getting younger. It's almost like we're turning back time when fighters started out in their early 20s, their late teens, and then they retired by 30.
Right. No, hey, listen, nutrition and different forms of training have prolonged fighters' careers for sure. Tell us about Claressa Shields. You were down there for that fight. It went the distance. Give us a report.
I really don't know what to say. She was a great amateur. Unfortunately, the amateur style has stuck with her. She hasn't. When you watch her fight, she really hasn't converted to a pro style, which is why she has she doesn't have as many knockouts against girls that she should have been able to knock out, like on Saturday. But right now, and I was speaking about this, to her promoter and some of the other guys up in press row. She's running out of opponents, and pretty soon she's going to lose her marketability because fans here, as fickle as they are going to really start saying to themselves, who is this girl fighting? And now, her talk, and she's really determined to go into MMA and fight Amanda Nunes. I don't know what would happen. This Claressa Shields, that the style that we see, and as undisciplined as she can be inside that ring against an Amanda Nunes, that would be a disaster.
Claressa Shields, I met her before she won her second gold. I was doing an event on LDL TV. It was a female Hall of Fame, and down in Florida. And I met her, and she was so impressive. Full of class. I mean, it was amazing to see all these female champions just, surround her and give her the props for winning the gold. And then she goes and wins another. She had it all. And then her mouth and just her mannerisms and everything changed, especially when she started hanging around with the Durrell brothers and all of that. Now, I agree with you. I think from a talent perspective, I believe she possesses talent. She fights more of a male style, but she goes over the top. She's not proving it in the ring in a sense. She's saying it with her mouth, calling out a man. I want to fight a man. All of this kind of stuff. I don't know. Is it her, or is it just the fact that she doesn't have much competition out there?
It's a little of both. One, she doesn't have a lot of competition, so there's no way there's nobody out there for her to build on and improve with. Nobody out there, to test her, give her different angles that she's never seen before, and so on. Which I believe why that her skill set hasn't evolved from that amateur style into the pro style. So it's no knock on her that she doesn't have that ability. But if you're not able to use that ability and improve, it's not going to happen. We've seen, a lot of male fighters that were sensational amateurs and that won some titles as a professional, but they were never able to fully transition into that pro style. As far as the comments on her attitude change and so on, yes, we've spoken about that a million times. Anytime I've ever met her in the past, she was so nice, and she just totally changed once she won that title, and she started hanging around with the wrong people. Now, if you look at her entrance, think about somebody who recently, more or less, put on a very similar entrance with that same outfit, because for the same reasons that I mention on this show all the time, they don't have somebody that's really promoting them right, and they're kind of self-promoting, and they are doing it the wrong way because they're copycatting somebody else.
Well, that's the unfortunate.
She had that. I swear, Deontay Wilder wore that outfit not too long ago.
The thing is that's the part of the sport that I feel bad for the fighters. And, Deontay Wilder and maybe even Claressa Shields now, Deontay Wilder is loyal. The one thing I love about Deontay Wilder, aside from his freakish power, is that he's a loyal guy. Loyalty means a lot to me personally. And, he's loyal to his team. Despite him leaving, tens, 20, maybe, who knows, maybe close to $100 million when all was said and done on the table for not taking certain fights that wouldn't have reduced his value at all. But yet he stayed loyal to them. And like you said, he's had to self-promote himself. from I'm going to kill somebody in the ring to saying crazy stuff. And you're right. Clarissa Shields is doing the same thing. I feel bad for them. Because
just be yourself. Same thing with Dante. Be yourself. Don't be somebody else. And, you're a bigger draw being yourself. And you're more fan-friendly.
But that's exactly what my basis of my point was when I mentioned Xander Zayas. Here he is signed on, or Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia was signed on by Golden Boy early on. They built him up. They carefully did. See, this is when promoters don't get the credit, all right? Where they invest the money. The promoters like Golden Boy and Top Rank do that. They invest the money. They get them the right fights. They get the PR out there, and these fighters create value. They all of a sudden have value. And a guy like Ryan Garcia, he was actually able to turn the value that Golden Boy created for him against Golden Boy. And a guy like Zayas, if he keeps looking good and improving and fighting better opposition, he's going to end up doing the same thing. But unfortunately, guys like Deontay Wilder and a female fighter like Clarissa Shields, they don't have that backing. What else are they supposed to do? And they have the talent.
Absolutely, man. It's hard, Bill. You know how brutal the boxing business is, business-wise. So these young guys that are trying to self-promote themselves, in my opinion, if they split with their promoter, they can end up, that can end up actually being bad for them, because their promoter can more or less kind of shut them out. And if they get this attitude where they become difficult to work with, another promoter isn't going to be so quick to pick them up and sign them.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
It's tough, but
yeah.
It is. But speaking of, I was thinking about you at that card, because when the Alicia Napoleon and the Sederos fight, as they're making a ring walk, I'm saying to myself, there's something about this fight that kind of reminds me of Anne-Sophie Matisse Holly Holm, where Sederos looks like she's just supposed to come in here and be this opponent to make somebody look good. And when the fight started, Napoleon had no idea what to do with her. And then when Napoleon was knocked down, I was saying to myself, wow, watch this really end up being a Holly Holm moment.
I tell you, that fight when Anne-Sophie Matisse stopped Holly
Same
Holm.
look, same style, doesn't look like she has much to her, and just big and strong.
I'll never forget looking over at that corner, and she was pretty much out of it for the first 30 seconds of that minute. And, I'll never forget it. Her trainer, Winklejohn, sending her out there, and that was after they gave her they thought they were helping her by saying it was a slip instead of giving her an 8 count. Yeah. Well, hey, Holly Holm did pretty well for herself. So.
Oh, absolutely. Got to Ryan Garcia. There's a kid over at our gym, Newburgh Hook Elite, named Darren. That is his favorite fighter, and he's been pestering me for weeks now. Do you really have pictures of you guys with Ryan Garcia? So and he was with us down in Atlantic City for the event. So next week I got to bring in that picture. I mean, this kid is like probably the biggest Ryan Garcia fan I've ever met in my life.
Why doesn't he just punch up the show and watch the actual interview? We'll get We'll get more than just a photo. He'll have some audio too.
And yeah, I'll have to tell him that. And Henry Hascup and Jackie Atkins, Henry, he got such a, our Henry Hascup, who does our trivia, he got such a, great ovation and response from the ring announcers when they mentioned him in Jersey. He had brought all those kids, including our kids from the gym. If it wasn't for him and Jackie Atkins, they wouldn't have been able to be there. They gave away 50 tickets to kids to bring them in there, all seeing their fight for the first time. And a lot of these kids, fighters, and they're going to be guys, Bill, that we see in the next 5-10 years that we're talking about. That's
great. That's great stuff. That's what we need. United States needs to get our amateur program back on track. And speaking of which, the World Boxing Super Series, something you and I both love. They finally announced the cruiserweight fight final between Marius Briedis and Uniel Dorticos. It's going to be March 21st. What's your thoughts on this fight? I know you love this series, and I love the cruiserweights. I think this is going to be every bit of as good as every other World Boxing Super Series final. What's your thoughts?
These guys match up great, don't they?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do, and I can't wait for this fight, and that's what I love about the World Boxing Super Series. I believe both of their losses came in the first cruiserweight Super Series, right?
Yes, Dorticos was knocked out with that one punch that he really didn't really see coming by Gassiev, a guy who everybody expected Breedis to face off against. That would have been a huge fight over in Europe especially. But Breedis, he lost a very close fight to Alexander Usyk. Breedis is a strong guy physically. He has quite a bit of pop to him. And, Dorticos, while he's a knockout artist, he does have that Cuban style to him. So these guys just match up great because there's so many different ways that this fight can end, Bill. Both of them have the ability to make it a one-punch knockout, and both of them have the ability to make it an elite boxing match. And both of them have the ability to switch at any point in time during the fight when things aren't going in their favor and be able to turn it into their favor. That's what makes it such a great fight.
Great points. One last thing before we let you go. They announced that Anthony Joshua and Kubrat Pulev will be fighting. They'll be getting a deal done within the next couple of weeks. And it was the big question of who Joshua was going to fight. We knew Pulev has a mandatory with the IBF, but so does Usyk with the WBO. But now it seems that Usyk will be fighting someone else. Rumor has it, Derek Chisora. And AJ is going to take on Pulev. How do you like the AJ Pulev fight?
I like the fight. I mean, Pulev, he always comes to fight. He always puts on a good fight. He's a bit of a dirty fighter, but he's kind of slow. And AJ right now with his new style, I think Pulev is a great opponent for him because AJ will be able to keep moving, and Pulev, who doesn't have the greatest footwork, will be able to apply that pressure to him that will help AJ, round out this new style of his, more of a boxer puncher rather than coming in there and just trying to be a headhunter, which I think AJ became very complacent with, and that's what really went wrong outside of some bad training habits with the Andy Ruiz Jr. fight. He's so used to hitting guys and guys falling and staying down. Pulev isn't going to be that easy, and so this is a perfect matchup for Anthony Joshua to kind of round out and become a better fighter, and Pulev is going to give it his all. Speaking about Jaime Munguia, as good as Anthony Joshua is, in a way, when you look back at that Andy Ruiz Jr. fight and that moment where Anthony Joshua more or less thought he had that fight won and then really didn't know what to do after Andy Ruiz Jr. got back up and started firing at him. Here's a guy who's had two-time world champion. He's had, 6 heavyweight titles now, and he's more or less got to kind of rebuild himself if he wants to stay top of the heap.
Well, how ironic is it that he basically learned how to take advantage of his size and strength, both with his jab, his movement, and, of course, his punching power from Vladimir Klitschko. And when you look at Klitschko's fight against Pulev, it was actually the only fight, with the exception of his fight against Anthony Joshua, where Klitschko was aggressive, was like a Mike Tyson. He destroyed Pulev in that fight. I mean, he came after him and beat the hell out of him. And, I'm wondering which version of AJ we're going to get. Are we going to get the guy that's going to, just basically be content in outboxing Pulev? Because Pulev, listen, I've always liked him. I saw him live in Denmark fight Derek Rossi. He's a strong guy, but he's limited. He doesn't have much defense. I think he's perfect for Anthony Joshua. If Joshua can establish his jab, I think it's going to be a long, bruising night for Pulev. But if AJ does try to attack him, you got to punch his chance with Pulev.
Absolutely, but what you just stated more or less mirrored what I was the point I was trying to get across, where Pulev is the type of guy that will make AJ stay on his toes and won't allow him to get lazy, and it's going to allow AJ to continuously improve this new style of his. When you speak about AJ with Klitschko, remember Vladimir Klitschko, he incorporated that style because he had a shaky chin. Vladimir Klitschko himself is the first to admit, his chin wasn't the best, and his style mimicked more or less very similar to my man Lennox Lewis. But Vladimir Klitschko, the difference between him and Anthony Joshua, while Anthony Joshua, looks like an Adonis from the waist up, he's huge. Vladimir Klitschko, that style was so effective for him that he is just more overall physically strong. Every part of Vladimir Klitschko was strong, and he knew how to use that size and that weight, no matter who it was against. Anthony Joshua never quite mastered that.
Great point.
Because Klitschko had that one-punch power. Remember, before that that one knockout, Klitschko was just destroying guys. I don't care how old I'll live to be. I'll never forget that Ray Mercer look after Mercer goes down the first time and gets up, and he looked at Klitschko and just shook his head, and we know what type of chin Mercer had. And that's before Klitschko was refined.
But Ray also said that, I've talked to him about that specific fight several times, and he said, if he could have one fight back in his whole career, he would want to refight that one, and the reason he gives is because he didn't train for the fight. So but
I love Ray, but it ended the same way, buddy.
No, listen. I'm not saying it wouldn't, but it's just listen. When a fighter says that, as much as Ray Mercer has said it, I have a tendency to lean towards believing that he wasn't at 100%, and I think the point that he was making was that he's mad at himself for not going into the ring against a guy like Klitschko and not being 100%. His only chance in hell in that fight was to be 100%, and he wasn't. That was, I think that was his point.
I understand and I agree. Ray Mercer isn't the type of guy that makes excuses. He lost. That's not the type of guy Ray Mercer was, so I wasn't trying to insinuate that. I was just saying, it's just that version of Vladimir Klitschko was special.
But he did.
He was special, period. He's an all-time great. I'm just saying that version of him, when he came out, when he hit guys, the power was just amazing.
But Ray also told me he did get into boxing really for one reason, because he wanted to get out of the tents. He was in a combat unit in the Army, and they told him if he joined a boxing team that he'd get to sleep inside on a bed, and that's why he got into it. So
yes.
The rest is history. He did pretty well for himself. So
absolutely. Speaking of Ray, real quick, just on how we mentioned a couple times about guys needing to improve and round out their skill set even after they've won a world title because they were able to get that title early. If the sport had more Ray Mercer types in it, with the sport, it doesn't matter the division. The sport doesn't really have guys of that caliber where they're not exactly the extreme elite, but they're world class in all these divisions. And I believe that's why, Bill, we're seeing so many of these young guys get titles so quickly, and they're really not getting better when they do have to go in there. Like you mentioned before, these younger guys, they go in there against somebody, and they're not doing that, and they don't do as well as expected because they haven't had this competition to round out their skill set. Boxing needs that. Where are these journeymen and these elite guys that make these very good guys into great guys?
There isn't that many fighters. Listen, we have more titles than we ever had, and we don't have as many fighters. I mean, that's one of the best points that Mike Silver makes in his book. I should be getting a cut because I promote his book a lot. But the Sweet Science, what is it? The Arc of Boxing: The Rise and Fall of Sweet Science, and that book basically compares errors. And with his point with the book, he's proving in his mind, he proves that the older boxers were better. But one of the statistics that he uses are the pool of fighters themselves. I mean, we're talking in New York State alone. I believe in 1940 or whatever year he was talking about, it was 20-something hundred licensed fighters in New York State alone. Now there's somewhere in that neighborhood nationally. So it is quite the difference. But it sounds like our youth, our amateur boxing program is on the rise. I hope it continues. And
it's absolutely doing great. And absolutely doing great in my opinion.
And I think you've been an advocate for it. So.
And absolutely, Leonard Lee over by me. I was up Floyd Patterson's gym the other night. I was up there. Somebody was asking me about how you were doing because we had a sparring session, with our gym against the Floyd Patterson gym.
No, that's great stuff. Keep it up, Dax. We'll talk to you next week, brother.
All right, everybody. You have a good day.
Take care. That's Dax Kahn. You can check out his columns up on BillyCBoxing.com. And speaking about checking out, listen, you guys hear me talk about Kenny Bear's barbecue rub all the time. Well, they came out with 2 new products, and you're looking at them right now. His blackened seasoning and also his all-purpose seasoning salt. The blackened is spicy, man. I love it. I got to try some now. Kenny has a tendency to create a need for me to have this stuff, and it's great stuff. If you haven't tried any of the new stuff that Kenny Bears has out, or his first home run, which was the Kenny Bears barbecue rub, which I put on everything, get yourself a bottle today. Just visit www.southerngourmetspice.com. That's southerngourmetspice.com, and get yourself a bottle today of either his new stuff or his original, which you're looking at right now, the Kenny Bears barbecue rub. Good stuff. Love it, man. So get yourself a copy of that as we speak. But in any event, I'm going to be getting my man Alex Papali on the line here in a second, as we'll get his thoughts on the fights. And joining us right now is Alex Papali. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Billy C. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. First, we'll talk about the Munguia fight. He stops Spike O'Sullivan in 2 minutes and 17 seconds of the 11th round. Listen, I'm spitting out some feathers this morning because I'm eating a little crow. For the last couple of weeks, I was laughing at some of the comments that Eric Morales was making about Munguia, saying that he's much faster at this weight, he's got hand speed, he's this, he's that. And I'm laughing. I'm saying, so how do you get hand speed? Well, I don't know how he did it, but in my opinion, he clearly displayed faster hands in his fight against O'Sullivan last night than I've ever witnessed before. What was your thoughts on the fight?
I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but I saw some of it, and from what I saw, yeah, I agree with you. It was interesting last night. We had it seemed like both main events were sort of limited guys, but guys who had some skills over their opponents that made enough for them to dominate them, and that's what I saw in Munguia versus Sullivan. It just seemed that he was stronger and, like you said, faster. And it was a fun, from what I saw, it was a fun scrap. And it was the same thing for Joe Smith Jr. versus Jesse Hart. It's just that I think that one was a sloppier fight. The parts of the Munguia fight I saw was a fun little brawl.
Well, we'll get to Joe Smith in a second because there's a lot I want to talk about that. But in the Munguia fight, I will say this. I mean, I'm not going to get into it too much if you didn't watch the whole thing. But the truth of the matter is I thought that Spike O'Sullivan was a perfect opponent for Munguia as his debut at middleweight because he's tough, because he comes forward, and definitely he's tough. Now, if anybody didn't think that Gary Spike O'Sullivan isn't a tough guy, all they got to do is watch last night's fight. He hung in there. It seems every time O'Sullivan does step up his level of opposition, he comes up on the losing end. But he's that kind of a fighter that you want to see a potential champion fight. What I saw with Munguia is that he does feel. It looks like he feels more comfortable at this weight. He definitely had faster hands. He also employed a jab that was very beneficial to him. And I just think that he's becoming a smarter fighter. Maybe that's the addition of Eric Morales. I certainly would lean towards that. The one thing I still think he needs to work on, though, is his defense. He takes way too many punches. And O'Sullivan, although he did take kind of a shellacking last night, he did land some power shots. As a matter of fact, after one of the early rounds, he connected just before the close of the round. And I was surprised Munguia didn't go down. I mean, the replay showed the shot, and it really landed flush. At 23 years old, they got to tighten up his defense, Alex.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. His chin is his defense at this point, and he's got a very solid chin. The kid can really take a licking, but you're right. I mean, how long is that going to happen? Because you don't want a young kid to keep getting battered cleanly like that. Oh wow! I had it's scrolling right now in a small window, and I just saw the stoppage. Yeah, the thing about Sullivan is that he was a perfect opponent for him because, I mean, even in that last round, the guy's still coming forward. So he's making it a fight. So it was really a good opponent for Munguia. But you're right. That's the thing about Munguia is that it's almost kind of like what we saw with Jarrett Hurd. When you take a lot of clean punches, that's going to catch up to you. I think it didn't last night. But it will.
There's no doubt. And O'Sullivan, I should say, he didn't have to.
That mustache, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, he didn't have to. I mean, he showed some grit because he knew he wasn't going to win that fight, and he stuck around. But Munguia after the fight said he wants the big names, Canelo, Triple G, or the Charlos. I'm not so sure he's ready for Canelo or Triple G, or even Dax mentioned like Deverenchenko. But I would love to see him fight Charlo. I think Charlo is extremely overrated. I know he comes in shape. He looks the part. He talks a lot of smack. And I would love to see Munguia fight one of the Charlos.
Yeah, I think Charlo Munguia would be a good fight. I do think that it would be interesting to see him against Golovkin, only because that fight was something that they, the Nevada State Athletic Commission didn't want to have a couple of years ago when Golovkin was still with HBO because he was too green. And I think it was the same year that they sanctioned Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah. That was Bob. That was the gutless, spineless Bob Bennett, the executive director of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, and in his wisdom, he didn't think that Munguia was experienced enough to fight Triple G, but yet he approved a pro debut fighter in Conor McGregor, who was an MMA guy, to fight arguably this era is one of the best boxers of this time in Floyd Mayweather. So go figure, Alex. Go figure. I wonder. Maybe he wasn't having enough brain food, because that was certainly a very stupid thing for him to say. Oh, he's not experienced enough, and then a couple months later he's approving McGregor against Mayweather.
Yeah, it's true, and I think that it just shows you that history and karma, they are what they are. And I think here we are now where that's a decent fight, Munguia versus Golovkin. I think it's a little early for him, but we know that Golovkin isn't what he used to be. So, to fight one of the young tigers in the division, a Charlo or a Munguia, would be interesting. But you're right. I think Charlo Munguia might be an easier fight to make. And that would be a good matchup too. So I don't know. I mean, and I hate to say this because he's a regional guy, but almost any fight at middleweight that doesn't involve Demetrius Andrade could be a fun matchup because you do have a couple of guys there. Well, it doesn't seem like Canelo's coming back. I don't know. I mean, I hate to rain on Golovkin's parade, but I don't think that fight's going to happen. I think if they ever get the third match, it might be at 168. Well, it looks like Billy Joe Saunders might be the opponent for Canelo in May.
I think that Triple G, the reason why I wouldn't see him against Munguia is because Triple G is on his way out and he needs a big payday. I don't think Munguia brings that kind of money to him, but you mentioned Jarrett Hurd. What a day! I hope they never make that one, because it would be an extremely dangerous fight for both of those fighters that have a tendency to just take a beating, and they both can dish it out too. I mean, somebody's not going to be the same when they leave that ring if that fight ever happens. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a Jarrett Hurd fight later this month. I'm pretty sure he's fighting on the undercard of the Garcia Redcatch fight.
No, he is. I'm saying a fight between him and Munguia.
Oh, no, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, because I think, because Hurd's been off a while, so it'll be interesting to see how he looks now.
But what's interesting about Jarrett Hurd is that, I would have thought that, because he didn't accept the fight to avenge his title loss, and, he didn't take that fight. Instead, I thought, okay, here it is. He's going to move up. Because I just couldn't imagine how he makes 154 anyway. I mean, he looks like a heavyweight come fight night. And then he announces that his next fight is at junior middle. So he clearly didn't want a rematch, which is totally bizarre in my opinion. But anyway, let's talk about Joe Smith Jr. against Jesse Hart. Now, I think that this fight was an even fight going into the fight. I did lean towards Joe Smith Jr., but Jesse Hart has the talent, and he's fought some tough guys, especially early in his career. I was extremely happy with Joe Smith Jr.'s performance, and extremely sick to my stomach watching Jesse Hart hugging and holding. I mean, I was surprised. I still think that Harvey Dock is one of the best referees in the business. He didn't even warn Jesse Hart once. What was your thoughts on the fight? I've been complaining too much about the holding.
I was looking forward to this matchup, and I did enjoy it, but I was surprised that it was as sloppy and sort of crude as it turned out to be. I was a little disappointed that Joe Smith couldn't get him out of there, but you're right. Jesse Hart was basically fighting to survive. I think some of the things that Andre Ward and Tim Bradley brought up were right on. The fact that what Tim Bradley was pointing out with some of Hart's footwork was very good, because there was a lot of times where it was he was almost making himself off balance. And I don't know if it was nerves or anxiety or what, but what Andre Ward was pointing out also was that it was almost like Hart knew that the strategy to beat a guy like Joe Smith Jr. was movement. But it was like there was so much movement. It was, like Ward said, it was unsustainable, and it became something that was just ugly to watch, because it just seemed very much that Hart was fighting, himself in a way because of the level of anxiety. Just very, very concerned about getting hit cleanly. And, sometimes the more concerned you are, the more likely you are to get hit cleanly. That said, it was stunning that Smith couldn't cut the ring off and stop him. But the other thing that compounded the weirdness of the whole night was the James Kinney atrocious scorecard, which hopefully our friend, the friend of the show, Larry Hazard Sr., will suspend that guy, because, or at least have a talking to him, because I don't understand what he was watching.
No, well, let's get to that in a sec. I don't. Joe Smith Jr. I love Joe Smith Jr. But come on, he's not I don't know how to say it, but he's not the greatest finesse fighter out there, and I don't think he ever will be, and I don't think he ever claimed to be. What we saw with Joe Smith is what Joe Smith does. As a matter of fact, they're working on his defense. They had to keep reminding him to keep his hands up. Because if Joe Smith tightens up his defense just a little bit, even 50%, and then can develop a jab, he seemingly use it a little bit last night, and he was getting between the guard of Jesse Hart several times, and his conditioning was fantastic. He's a tough out. And, his busyness, if that's the right way to put it, is what won the fight. Hart never was able to regain. He wasn't able to come back. If his game plan was to try to tire Smith out in the early rounds, which is what I thought was happening when I was watching him hug and kiss, and, well, no kissing, but he looked like he wanted to. After a while, it just it got boring. It was the same thing. Then I was watching Smith closer to see what he was going to do to combat it. The one thing that I would have liked to have seen Smith do a little better was not follow him around the ring as much.
Right.
I mean, he wasn't really anticipating where he was going to go. He wasn't cutting the ring off, or it wasn't like he was forcing Hart to go in the opposite direction that he wanted. He was following him around the ring, and eventually would get him against the ropes, get him in the corner, and work him over a bit, giving him the business, if you will, But
I was surprised because I would have thought that some body work, especially because he was not on steady legs for much of the fight. That a little, if he had cranked up the body work, like you said, used a jab, there's a lot of basics that I think would go a long way to Joe Smith Jr.'s attack if he added them in. Body work especially. I mean, he hits so hard that a guy like Jesse Hart, who doesn't have the greatest foundation under him, body punching would have really, I think, helped last night. But he didn't really need any help, until the scorecards were read. Then I'm sure they were a little nervous there for a moment. But, the right guy won. So I think, and that's the other thing, too, is that light heavyweight is really an exciting division. We have guys that, everybody brings a different skill set. And I think there's enough guys there that can make for some fun. We saw a really good fight. What was it, 2 weeks ago or was it last week? The Pascal. That fight was really good. And then we've got another matchup next week from Turning Stone, another light heavyweight match. So I enjoy that when you have several weeks in a row where you look at some of the players in a division. And I think that this is kind of cool in that sense. Over the course of a month, we're getting a look at 6 to 8 light heavyweights, and that's a cool thing.
No, that definitely is cool. Going to the scorecards, at one point towards the end of the fight, Smith's corner was saying, stop him. We don't want to put this in the judge's hands. And I actually was saying to myself, this fight is in the bag. If I'm Joe Smith, I don't take any risks. He could let Hart come to him, and Hart wouldn't come to him. So basically, they'd be standing there looking at each other for the last 2 rounds. I figured, Smith, do it. What's the point? Why take a risk? He did get a few shots, did land on him because of his lack of defense. And when they said split decision, I was like, what? And I hear the two scores that were for Smith, 98-91, which is the way I scored it, 97-92, which is totally, acceptable. And then to hear 95-94 for Hart, I was like, this is a corrupt judge that should never be allowed to judge again. And if this person was not corrupt, they don't know what they're watching, and they shouldn't be allowed to judge again. This was not, and I would have been outraged, Alex, if it was 95-94 for Smith. I would have been like, what fight were you watching? And to hear it say that it was for Hart, unbelievable.
Yeah, because you add the knockdown, and that means that he had Hart up by 3 rounds, I guess, mathematically, if you took away the knockdown. So that is kind of hard to believe. And
they could have stopped the fight. And when he was on wobbly legs, and Harvey Doc's going, "Are you okay?" He's going, "Yeah, I'm okay." I'm saying to myself, "No, he's not." If he was lucky that there was 7 seconds left, because he wouldn't have survived if it was a minute left. And there was another time after that where the ropes clearly held him up, in my opinion, and that could have been scored a knockdown. So it wasn't like these were close rounds. That's the other part that makes this even worse for that judge, because they weren't close rounds, Alex. You know how we've talked about many times, we're watching a fight, it's a close round. I may have scored it for side A, you may have scored it for side B, but it was a close round. It could have gone anyway, and sometimes the judge is live, could make people think especially when the announcers are polluting viewers with their thoughts sometimes with scoring. You never know from the position the judge is at, and that's why sometimes they seem a little crazy. But as long as they were close rounds to begin with, you can actually backtrack it and see where the score came from. I can't with this because I don't see that fight except the one round that I gave to Hart. I don't see it being anything but a win every round for Joe Smith.
Yeah, it was that. That's the thing, I think, where he does need to be asked what he was looking at, because it was one of those fights where it appeared that if you take away, some of the, it's not like Hart was landing lots and lots of punches. But if you look at just the geography of the fight, you had Smith pressing Hart back and Hart on the in a retreat the entire fight. So, and then I think also what Andre Ward pointed out was a very good point, was that the kind of guys that are difficult for Joe Smith to fight are guys that are big, strong boxers. Jesse Hart didn't have the physical strength to keep Joe Smith away. So that's what's kind of hard to fathom, too, because if you're sitting ringside, it's hard not to see the guy who's much stronger, especially in a case like that last night where it just, like, even though Smith wasn't able to cut the ring off and give him nowhere to run and to stop him, every single round was him bullying Hart around and banging him around, and Hart being forced to constantly clinch. So it is kind of weird to think that one judge can see that and come up with enough rounds to say, oh yeah, that the other guy won.
No, he filled out his card. He never watched the fight. And you're being kind with the clinching. It wasn't clinching. It was literally holding him in a bear hug. I mean, I never really. If I'm Harvey Dock, I take a point away. It was not. He didn't even get warned. It was so obvious every single time. I mean, I could see doing it for a little bit or in the second part of the fight or if you're in trouble. But this was his game plan, it looked like. And I think you hit it on the head earlier. He was just trying to survive the fight. It reminded me of Bone Crusher Smith against Mike Tyson. Do you ever want to survive? Do you ever want to survive? It's like, remember they asked him that at the end of the fight. Hey, Bone Crusher, why'd you hug Tyson up? Did you ever want to just survive? It's like, what? You're the Bone Crusher.
I think that's a good point, is that they weren't like strategic clinching like, say a Sugar Ray Leonard would use or something when he's boxing a more aggressive, opponent. It was survival clinching, like help me, that kind of clinching. You're right. And that looks very different. And it's hard to imagine you could find as many rounds as Kinney did to score Hart's way. It
was hugging. He was whispering in his ear, I'm in room 447, come and join me later. I mean, come on. It was pathetic. And like my man, Mitch, he emailed me earlier, and he says, I don't want to make excuses, but, and that's exactly what he said. I don't want to make excuses, but I hurt my hand in sparring. You know what? I can't stand when a fighter even wastes his breath saying, I don't want to make excuses, but, and then here comes the excuse. And I credited a guy like Tommy Hearns when he fought your idol, Marvin Hagler. He broke his hand in that first round. I didn't know that for years. He kept it so quiet. He let Marvin enjoy his moment, and he deserved to. And I think that shows a lot about the character of Tommy Hearns and other fighters like him. When you immediately, I don't want to make an excuse, but you're not holding yourself accountable. It's somebody else's fault. It's your broken hand's fault. Look, it's like this. If you're not 100%, don't fight. I mean, yeah, you might upset the network, you might upset the promoter, you might upset your bank account, but the truth of the matter is, this is a hurt sport. You say it all the time, Alex. If you're not 100%, why are you going to get in the ring? Are you devaluing your opponent that much that you think you're going to beat him with one hand? So I don't buy it. I don't think a fighter that has a hand that's so hurt that he's and I didn't see it in the fight. I didn't see him favor anything except the fact that he was getting beat up.
Yeah, I didn't. Me neither. I'm surprised to hear that, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it was sad. It was sad. Moving on to
one thing I did want to say is, since we did see him back out in and you had that great interview with him in November, but I thought Buddy McGirt did a great job in the corner of Kem Killich. That fight, Steven Nelson looked pretty damn good, and I enjoyed that fight. And I think that what Buddy McGirt said at the end was, I'd rather have a guy mad at me tonight than mad at me forever, and that was really good.
Exactly, and that's the one thing I say about Buddy McGirt. I mean, he definitely cares for. If you're signing on Buddy McGirt to be your trainer, you're getting a guy that's going to truly protect you. But so, have you caught any of this? Tit for tat arguing in social media between Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence?
Yeah, I did watch the undercards on ESPN Plus, and Christina Poncher did have an interview with him, and yeah, he said that that's going to be his new thing going forward. Is I guess he's going to be a little more vocal on the Twitter machine, and call these guys out. I don't know. Maybe that'll work for him these days. It certainly can't hurt. But I don't know. He had some thoughts. They made it sound like Errol Spence versus Manny Pacquiao might happen first. And Crawford said, he wishes Spence well if that happens first, but he certainly wants the winner. I don't know. I hope we get to see that fight, a Spence-Crawford match at some point, or, if it is Crawford-Pacquiao, that would be great. So, I don't mind all this talking if it leads to something. If it's just talk, that would be really unfortunate because, this is one of the best fighters in the world, and you want to see him fight the very best, and I think unfortunately, because of the promotional situation, he's going to have to cross the street, as they say, and it seems like the powers that be don't really want that.
It's sickening. Manny Pacquiao signs on with PBC/Mayweather in hopes to get a fight with Mayweather. Pacquiao shows that he's still got something left in the tank. He's obviously not the same fighter he was years ago, but he beats Keith Thurman. Many regarding Keith Thurman as a top welterweight. I've lost all my respect for Keith Thurman, but credit goes to Pac-Man for beating him. You would think that, and the reason why Pacquiao did this was to try to get a rematch with Mayweather. I like a rematch with Mayweather, and the only reason is because they're both similar in age, they're both similar in career paths. Manny did have his excuse. He said, I hurt my shoulder, I hurt my shoulder. He had hurt his shoulder, and, I believe that that's an even fight, regardless of the fact that if Floyd beats him again. It doesn't matter. It's an even fight. But to suggest that Manny Pacquiao has to keep fighting these young guns at 40 years old, I think is a travesty. And I don't know who's around Manny Pacquiao to talk to him. But for Errol Spence Jr. to go after him versus a Terrence Crawford, that doesn't speak too well for him as well, just like it didn't for Keith Thurman. And yeah, okay, the Pac fans are going to say, well, he'll beat Spence like he beat Thurman. You know what? I wouldn't go to too often. Terrence Crawford is at the top of his game. Errol Spence is at the top of his game. They're both in the same division. So was Tommy Hearns and so was Sugar Ray Leonard. And what did they do? They fought. and it's time for Terrence Crawford to fight Errol Spence Jr. And I think Terrence Crawford, the way he's handling this, basically man against man. Hey, you know that you can go. He says in some of the tweets that I saw, he says, you know that your management can tell you to fight this one, but if you go and say, I want this fight, they'll make it. He says, you know that. Let's stop the BS. And he's right.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I hope that that in that sense that Spence mans up and does say, look, bring me Crawford. I don't want Pacquiao. And it's no knock on Pacquiao, but like you're saying, Spence versus Crawford is the Leonard Hearns of today. So yeah, we'd love to see it. I mean, and that's what Teofimo Lopez versus Vasily Lomachenko is. That fight, it looks like it is going to happen. I think they're talking about April for that fight. So, yeah, I would love to see Crawford versus Spence. I think everybody would. I'd much rather see that than Spence versus Manny Pacquiao. But, as we often get in this sport, we don't necessarily get what we want.
Manny Pacquiao doesn't have anything else to prove.
No.
He really doesn't. And as a matter of fact, if Floyd won't fight him, to retire beating Keith Thurman is a pretty damn good feat. Mayweather retired beating Conor McGregor, all right? So, I mean, let's be real. Manny Pacquiao, I don't know why he would even consider it, and I see it being more negative for Errol Spence, because if he doesn't destroy Manny Pacquiao, there's going to be naysayers. But like somebody just brought up, I do believe, in all due respect for Errol Spence, that he does get a warm-up fight after that accident. But I doubt a Manny Pacquiao fight should be considered a warm-up fight. And I think he should get some kind of a, shake off the ring rust fight against someone and then immediately fight, Terrence Crawford, in my opinion. To me, that's what should happen,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be good. I mean, I think that maybe that's how Spence is looking at Pacquiao, as a good opponent to fight against after a nearly fatal car accident. But I don't know. I like you're saying, I think that would be a mistake, because the thing we saw against Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman is that the guy's not done.
He's not done, but why should he fight the best of the best?
No,
I
think it's, I think part of it, and sadly, I think some of it is the promotional shenanigans, is that the PBC would like very much to stick it in Top Rank's face to have a Spence versus Pacquiao event and make them wait for the Crawford fight. That's just my opinion. Crawford didn't say anything about that, and it almost seemed as if Christina Poncher was sort of setting the ball up for him to hit that one out, but he didn't, and that's where he said that he just hopes the best man win, and he would like to see the opponent, the winner.
I just think that Mayweather, he should man up. He should be a man once, really, and if he truly stays out of the ring, I respect that. But if he goes back in against another UFC guy or something, and he's picking these, and to Mayweather's credit, I mean, it's not like he's doing it for nothing. They're throwing boatloads of cash at the guy. So I mean, I guess I can't argue with that. But as far as a historical fight, to give Manny Pacquiao a rematch, chances are Floyd wins the fight anyway. And it actually solidifies the argument about those two, because there are actually people that feel that Manny Pacquiao won that fight.
Skip Bayless.
Yeah, well, listen. The truth of the matter. There's other people that believe that too, Alex. But the truth of the matter is that Manny Pacquiao has nothing left to prove. The only fight that makes any kind of sense and would make a ton of money would be a rematch with Mayweather. Other than that, there's plenty of other fighters that these guys can go and fight. Manny Pacquiao shouldn't be one of them. He's long overdue to stop fighting, in my opinion. But Anyway, one last thing, Alex. Pulev will be Anthony Joshua's next opponent. It looks like Usyk is going to fight Derek Chisora, and then after, assuming AJ gets by Pulev, that he would make his mandatory WBO defense against Usyk. What's your thoughts about a AJ against Pulev? How do you see the fight going, and who's going to win?
I like that fight because I think Pulev brings exactly what we've seen Anthony Joshua have some trouble with. He's a great, big, strong guy who comes after you, and I think that that's a good. It'll be a good barometer to see how Anthony Joshua handles it, especially after what happened with Andy Ruiz in the first fight, because I don't think he didn't. Yes, he defeated him in the rematch, but he didn't so dominate him that it looks like all those little demons are gone. I think Anthony Joshua is a guy who is always going to have issues with his chin, and until he's able to use his tremendous size in aggressive manner, I think he might have trouble with guys who just bring it. And I think Pulev is one of those guys. So that could be a fun fight. Quite honestly, I wanted to see Usyk fight him, but Usyk versus Chisora is a really good fight. That will tell us, how Usyk handles these big men. I like Usyk to win that fight as long as he doesn't get take too much punishment. I think he should be able to beat a guy like Chisora. But of course, that's the thing about heavyweight that makes it so interesting, is that size sometimes means more than skill in that division.
It's true. And sometimes power drives the division itself too, without any skill. Hint, hint.
Absolutely.
But anyway, Alex, I appreciate your thoughts, and look for an email concerning our trip that we were all talking about. I have some dates. I'm going to bounce around you guys, and hopefully we'll be announcing that next week.
Sounds good, Billy C. Take care.
All right, take care. That's Alex Papali giving us his thoughts on the fights. And if you're giving any thoughts to what you want to put on the next burger you eat, try this stuff, man. I like spicy stuff, so I'm leaning towards his blackened seasoning, but his all around seasoning is great. I'm talking about Kenny Bear's, his barbecue rub. Kenny Bear's barbecue rub, I put on everything, including pizza. I had it on white pizza yesterday. But two new products from SouthernGourmetSpice.com, the Cajun rub and also the seasoned salt. So check it out. Make sure you tell them Billy C sent you. So go visit the website right now and get yourself a bottle or two or 10. SouthernGourmetSpice.com. I got an email from my man Jesse, and he said, hey, Billy C., Happy New Year. Well, Happy New Year to you, Jess. And he said, Munguia looked okay. He said, he's still, he says he's still making silly, bad habits, dropping his hands. He's not using his jab enough, too many power shots, not enough head movement. He's not going to the body enough. Munguia versus David Lemieux, or a 15 to 25 ranked fighter. And he says, what's your thoughts on Hector Tanara Jr.'s progression? Is he ready to take a high step up? I think, just to answer that, I do think he's ready to take a step up. His win over, a dominating win, a unanimous decision over Juan Carlos Burgos, showed that last night, 99-91 and a 97-92 twice, with the way the judges scored that fight. But in any event, I think that I don't know if I agree with my man Jess because I thought that I did see some improvements in Munguia. Yes, he is still making some bad decisions, like dropping his hands and not moving his head, taking too many shots, not utilizing his jab. But he did start to utilize his jab in that fight, and it was definitely working for him, and it was setting up his right hand. And I think he learned a lot about the success of setting up his power punch with the jab last night against Spike O'Sullivan. I truly believe that. So I saw some improvement with him last night. There's no question about that. I saw improvement with Munguia. I think Eric Morales should be given credit for helping him, to be honest with you, because I saw the improvement from Munguia last night. Thinking a little more. He looked like he's very comfortable at the weight. So I liked what I saw. Normally I agree with Jess, but in this particular case, I don't know. I think he's being a little hard on Munguia. I thought that he looked pretty good, considering. Now I do also. I will agree with Jess in a sense that he definitely needs some other fights prior to moving up to some of the names that he was suggesting, a la Triple G or Canelo. But I do like him against Charlo. I think a fight against Charlo would be great. Personally, I think both Charlo brothers are extremely overrated. I don't want to be a naysayer, but they haven't really fought anybody. Harrison was in Charlo's last fight. The junior middleweight Charlo, in his last fight, Harrison was winning that fight by outboxing him and then got caught. So I give credit to him for winning the fight. But the truth of the matter is they're overrated. They haven't fought anybody. They're pounding their chest, and they haven't fought anybody. I think Munguia beats either Charlo brother right now and knocks them out. It gives them a good old-fashioned beating. But I do also believe that if I'm Munguia, I need to tighten up my defense big time. So Munguia stops O'Sullivan in the 11th round, 2 minutes and 17 seconds. My thoughts on that fight is I like Munguia, and I thought it was the right opponent, and it's going to be interesting to see him in his next fight at middle. As far as the Smith-Hart fight goes, Joe Smith Jr. had his way. Outpowered Hart. I was extremely disappointed in Jesse Hart. I thought it would be a better fight. I thought Jesse Hart came to fight. He didn't. And whether he came to fight and then changed his mind during the fight, like the first round, I don't know. I honestly believe that Jesse Hart's game plan was to try to get Smith tired, get him into the later rounds. It didn't work. It didn't work for him because Smith never tired. And when the later rounds came, it was Jesse Hart who was fading and fading quickly. One of the other topics we discussed today was the Pulev Anthony Joshua fight that is close to being signed, sealed, and delivered. We should be getting an announcement within the next couple of weeks on that fight and when it's going to take place and where it's going to take place. There was a lot of discussion because the IBF is demanding the mandatory be fought, and that is Pulev. The WBO is demanding that their mandatory be fought, and that was Usyk. But it appears that the promoter, which happens to be the promoter for both AJ and Usyk, and that is Eddie Hearn, that we got a Usyk versus Derek Chisora fight, and we will be seeing the IBF mandatory match between Anthony Joshua and Kubrat Pulev. Now, as far as the Pulev fight itself, Pulev, many people think he's this power puncher. I know they like to call him that, but he's really not. He's not known for his punching power. People assume he has punching power, but not so much. Or maybe he could have had a little more. I don't know. But I did get to see him live once. I mentioned it earlier in the show. I saw him against Derek Rossi in Denmark, and he wasn't really that impressive then. As a matter of fact, Derek Rossi had him in all kinds of trouble prior to him getting in trouble himself. But, it's interesting to see what version of Pulev we're going to see. And I say that because when Pulev, let me go back. AJ got under the guidance of Vladimir Klitschko, which helped them in the rematch with the Andy Ruiz Jr. fight. If you notice in that fight, AJ fought a lot smarter, utilized his jab, utilized movement, waited and was patient to land power punches, was able to avoid the attack of Andy Ruiz. And a lot of that was the sessions, whether they be discussion or in the gym as well, with Vladimir Klitschko. Well, one of the most exciting fights of Vladimir Klitschko's career, in my opinion, was his fight against Pulev. And the reason why is because Klitschko did not fight like that. He came right after Pulev, like he, stole the tires off his car and beat the snot out of Pulev in that fight. And it's going to be interesting to see what how Klitschko gives advice for now his protege Anthony Joshua against that same opponent. As both Dax and Alex suggested, it would probably be advantageous for Anthony Joshua to outbox him, keep moving around the same way he fought Andy Ruiz Jr. But we'll see. Listen. The weakness that Anthony Joshua has, the biggest weakness, I know people are going to say, oh, he's got a suspect chin, whatever. But his real weakness is his inability to fight guys that are substantially shorter than him. And although Pulev is a monster compared to me, I believe he's 6'4", similar to a Chris Arreola size. And those 6'4" guys, what's Anthony Joshua, 6'6", 6'7"? So that's a big difference for him. And he doesn't punch downward too well. Now, Pulev might just be at that cutoff where, he's not really that much smaller. And, it depends how he fights. If he fights tall, it's going to be fighting into AJ's favor. If he fights a little with a crouch, which he sometimes does, he reminds me a little bit of when Ruslan Shagayev was at his peak. Sometimes Pulev fights similar to that way. And I think that would be his chance in trying to get in close and land a power shot and test that chin of AJ, which we all know is a bit suspect. But I'm anticipating Anthony Joshua to try and outbox Pulev, and I think he's taken on the persona that he really doesn't care if he knocks his opponent out anymore, or if he wins by decision. So I'm interested in that fight, but like Alex, I'm also extremely interested in the fight between Derek Chisora and Usyk, because I'm not convinced that Usyk is ready for top heavyweights. I mean, yes, he won his first heavyweight fight, and yes, he's extremely talented. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan. But when you're starting to call out the Anthony Joshuas and Tyson Furies and Deontay Wilders of the division, the top three, if you will, that's a little risque for a guy that is going to be nowhere near their size, weight-wise, and certainly isn't going to have the power. He can box, a boxing match between him and Tyson Fury would be interesting. But I don't know if he's got the pop. We'll have to wait and see. I think a really good test would be his fight against Derek Chisora. We did talk about the Deontay Wilder-Tyson Fury rematch. It's set for Las Vegas on February 22nd. And they've begun advertising it. And when I say that, there was a lot of confusion because Tyson Fury has the deal with through Top Rank with ESPN Plus, which is a paid subscription-based service, and Deontay Wilder's with the PBC and Fox and pay-per-view. They were talking about it during the fight last night as being a pay-per-view with the with the ESPN Plus logo. They still are referring to it as a pay-per-view. So I'm anticipating it to be a downright pay-per-view. I don't think it'll be available on ESPN Plus, but I hope I'm wrong. Because if it's on pay-per-view and ESPN, more sense to me because of the simple fact that ESPN Plus has been bragging about their subscription service, etc., etc., etc. So anyway, one last thing I want to mention here. We are planning a get-together, a Billy C get-together, where we're going to do this show, and it will be down in St. Simon's Island at Sal's restaurant. We've done many in the past. We're working out some logistics, so I will have some dates and stuff for you. But what I want to throw out there is that the topic of the show is going to be, actually Sal came up with the idea yesterday. He and I were chatting, and I love it. And we're going to do a whole show based around it, would be the comparisons between the 4 top fighters of 2 prominent eras. So we'll go back to the last great era of boxing, where the 4-headed dragon was Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, Tommy Hearns, and Roberto Duran, and we're going to compare them to a more modern era of 4 top fighters, and that has to be Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, Canelo Alvarez, and most likely a Triple G or somebody along those lines. The comparisons between the two, all of the fighters dominated their respective divisions throughout their era. So we're going to have a topic and debate. We'll revisit their fights. It's going to be fun. We're trying to coordinate our whole team going down there, and there will be some room for you. So if you do want to be involved with our whole little trip, so to speak, drop me an email, billy@talkinboxing. That's TALKINBOXING.com. I'll let you know the options of travel, where we're staying, all that stuff, and you can be part of our group as we do this. It's not that this will be closed to anybody, because anyone can come down and eat at Sal's and be part of the live show. But if you want to be with our group specifically, I'm just curious to know how many people even would want to be. So now's the time to drop me an email, billy@talkinboxing, TALKINBOXING.com. We're shooting for this to be, I believe, is it April? Is it? I think it's towards the end of April. I have the dates. We're just trying to catch it right after spring break, which I think is over in March, right? I don't know. Anyway, if you're interested, let me know. Hey, listen, that concludes our show for today. Make sure you tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, I'll leave you with this. Ciao, baby.